Something really struck me from what Najwa said about how we embrace the cliche and turn it around, and how our success is shared by helping others achieve their potential. And we just need to be, generous towards each other a little bit more. And I think, in the next panel, there might be something that we will surface around those themes, because this panel will focus on the unaccountable work of women in the family, community, society, and the environment, and explores how we might rewrite these narratives about the contribution of women in this space. So panelists for this panel are FAIZ from UN Women, KUNTHEA from JASS Associates Southeast Asia, and Dr. IMAN BIBARS from Ashoka Arab World. And this panel is moderated by CHEN from S&P Global Foundation. So over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. Firstly, a warm welcome to everyone, supporters, partners, stakeholders, fellow changemakers who is joining us today at our annual summit and gathering to celebrate women social entrepreneurs in ASEAN. This is our second year, and we are pleased to have a great lineup of speakers and topics today. I'm Cheryl. I lead corporate responsibility and sustainability for Asia at S&P Global. And over the last few years, I'm really blessed to have the opportunity to partner with the Ashoka team and work together on the program on advancing women social entrepreneurs in ASEAN. I'm glad to be moderating our first plenary discussion today on scaling deep, rethinking narratives of invisible power and the female gender. And in case some of you are wondering, instead of a one-way Zoom webinar of this size with nearly 200 of us, it is a group Zoom meeting, amongst all of us. And I think it really anchors our intention of community and trust building as we come together to rethink and all be a collective part of this platform and community. Coming back to our panel topic, many of you may be wondering, what is scaling deep and how is it different from the usual scaling that we use in the social space? There are three kind of scaling strategies. Most of us are familiar with scaling out, impacting greater number of people through replication, geographic reach, scaling up by impacting laws and policies, and scaling deep, as the word goes, is deep work, includes shifting and transforming cultural values, beliefs, mindsets, value systems, and norms. Dr. Iman would be able to elaborate much more on these three scaling strategies later. So as Om has shared on this panel, we would really like to delve into redefining success and progress, how women social entrepreneurs has been carrying the flag, and how can we delve into the immeasurable work in both sense of the word, work and contributions of women in family, community, society, and environment. We're very honored to have with us very experienced and established practitioners and speakers on this panel. Dr. Iman BIBARS, Vice President, Ashoka, Regional Director of Ashoka Arab World, YULIAWATI FAIZ, Head of Programs, UN Women Indonesia, and KUNTHEA, Regional Co-Director, JASS Associates, Southeast Asia. And I thought rather than me reading off their bios, it would be more interesting to hear from them directly on highlights of their background and their wonderful work in women empowerment over the years of contribution. So let's start with the starter question. Dr. Iman, Dwi, KUNTHEA, would you share with us a quick overview of your experience? What brings you here and what would you like to be part of rethinking in this conversation? Maybe to Dr. Iman first.
Okay, I don't know, it's good morning in Egypt, it's good afternoon in Southeast Asia. What brings me here is Nani and Ayenda and the team. But it's I find myself now taking the nationality of Southeast Asia, and I love it, by the way. But really, I am so proud of the team, but also of all what the program has done. Really, because what I heard from Najwa now and what I heard from CHERYL is making my dream come true. I have been working, I'm probably the oldest one here. I've been working for more than 30 years. I will not say that, and I've been working on empowering women all over the world. The WISE has started since 2018 to be global, which is Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship. And really what brings me here is the great work that the Southeast team and all the program has done, and all the funders and the supporters of the program. I agree totally with Najwa that women face a lot of challenges, but also women overcome these challenges. And that's what we want to show. When Najwa said we want to celebrate the successes, that's what we want to do. We want to change the rules of the game. When you talk, CHERYL, about the strategies, yes, we have developed new strategies to redefine success, because that's the only way we are going to change the world. We cannot be trying to cope with them. Scaling out is really what everybody does in the business sector, but we as women scale deep, which is rethinking how people think about certain issues, you know? And if you change how people think today, then their kids and their generations to come will be affected. So we will affect more people. You know, if we change, for example, about women being beaten, or what CHERYL said about us only being judged about our roles in home or the multiple roles we play, then our kids will be changed and generations to come will be changed. So scaling deep is really rethinking and changing mindsets. Scaling up is changing policies, which also Nani and Dina and myself, we've changed laws that affected millions and millions of kids across the street, the years. So I'm here because I want to celebrate with you. I want to take your nationality. No, I'm joking. But I also want to empower and support in any way I can and learn from you. I have been working with women empowerment, as I said, for many years, but I also want you all to join the WISE movement, the Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship, because that's the only way we can change laws. That's the rules of the game. That's the only way we can define and redefine our impact. Every one of you had an impact. Every person on this session is a successful woman, and we have to be proud of it and to share it. And later on, I will go in deeper, but really, that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iman. You're absolutely right. We're all part of this women, and we can all do our own part, right? Dui, over to you.
Wow, my experience will be pale in comparison with Iman. I feel humbled by a lot of thinking around these issues. If I can share a little bit about my background, I'm a late starter. I start my career just before 30 or even close to 30 because I have to take care of my family, right? And look where I am now. And I've been working in international organization many times, many years on women's empowerment issues. And I think this forum, what brings me here, except for, of course, Nani with her magic words. but I think working in this very privileged organization, if I may say that, you know, in a different spectrum from social entrepreneurs, from the, you know, the government or the facilitator of government consultation or the multilateral organization, I think it's important for me to think critically about what we have been doing. And I think it is important for also to unpack a little bit the so-called power and empowerment process. Right? We often use that in the International Development Forum as you know, like something that is very exotic, something that is very meaningful and impactful. But what power is, how we can then empower women, what Najwa meant by, you know, we have to think, you know, not in the cliche, but how can we unpack that cliche? How can we then change the system? What the role of international organization in this regard, in this ecosystem of entrepreneurship? So this, I think I came here because I want to critically challenge myself and my thinking that is shaped by my organization and where I come from, and to also you know, convey the message that it needs more than just a systemic change to scale deep. It needs a lot more than that. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Dewey. And you mentioned that you're a late starter, but I think all of us, doesn't matter whether we start early or we start late. What matters is that we start. And in our collective roles, whether yourself in an international organization or whether we work for a social service organization or in the private sector, we all can play a collective role in thinking critically and doing the work that shifts the needle, whether is it in scaling up, scaling deep, or scaling out. To KUNTHEA, over to you. Share with us a bit of your experience, what brings you here, and what would you like to be rethinking?
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, like the same with me, Nani is bringing me here because of her magic. And I also you know, I know Nani long time ago when I'm starting working in this field, 17 years already, and it was like a way that I learned it deeper and deeper within my experience empowering the woman. And I also starting to learn a lot of how the invisible power that been the big obstacle for the woman. And then in 2015, I start writing, co-writing with one of my co-author about diving deep, going far. Because in Cambodia, we have one slogan to say that women cannot dive deep, cannot go far. So we have the book to talk to say diving deep, going far. That really reveal a lot of experience of the invisible that women are facing, a lot of questions, because when we're talking with my colleague or the woman that we're working with, that a lot of stuck in that obstacle of the, you know, invisible, and those not many people are really look at to that issue as the political issue, because they thought that that is the personal issue. But it's a big issue. So we really look at to those unpack those invisible power very critically in the work that JASS is doing in the region. So I mean, what that really bring me here is my passion and commitment to be the part of the change, to be, and also to learn and challenge from the perspective that where we are doing right now with so many audience and the panelists here, that we can also build our collective thinking and understanding that we can build a better society where we can get a better life for the woman and the marginalized group in the society who not really get, you know, the benefit from this society. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, KUNTHEA. And thank you for writing the book, you know, Going Deep and Going Far. I absolutely believe that women are the ones going deep and going far. And if we are unable to do that, it's either we have raised up the walls around ourselves, but through ourselves, or, you know, there are, again, of course, systemic barriers which we are able to overcome together as a community collectively. I would like to circle back to Dwi. You know, KUNTHEA mentioned invisible power. In your perspectives and your work at the international organization level, what do you think are some of these underlying assumptions that influence, you know, perceptions on this invisible power of women? And what narratives do we need to shift?
Okay, and this is what I meant by hard question. Is it intentional? No, I'm kidding. No, first of all, I think we need to understand the reason why women's power remains invisible. I think we have to go back deep. The root cause of it is patriarchal culture, as we also agree, that has made distinction of role based on gender in such a way that the socially constructed role, the gender role, held by women remains in the private sphere less than what the public sphere or held by men. Yet this socially constructed role was prescribed to women as if it is an innate role. Hence, as we can see, many women are not by choice stuck in the private sphere. What Najwa meant by the invisible wall that we often refer to is that socially constructed role. And that makes this distinction between, you know, what women do, raising children, or the so-called unpaid care work or domestic work, is less than what men has been doing as breadwinner, No, it has an ascribed roles and a stereotype to it. And what is also important is while this very significant less representation of women in area where their leadership can be visible, the impact is that it's also denying that the leadership that women have in private sphere, such as unpaid care work or taking care of the family, is less important. You know, it's also denying that it's important, right? It makes data is invisible. Gender disaggregated data is nowhere to be found. The impact of COVID. How can we know that COVID has impact? Women are more impacted in the pandemic. You know, that kind of invisibility that makes it's difficult to for us to really gain our sort of agency. Secondly, I would like to highlight how the notion of invisible power is somewhat misleading and has become the rationale to make women power invisible. If women have power, they could exercise their power. They should be able to exercise their power. And this is where, by saying the word invisible, we recognize that they have power, but they could not exercise the power. Go back to the domestic sphere. Okay, if woman is powerful in the domestic sphere, and how come domestic violence is continuing to rise during the pandemic? And I think then your last question about how we then change the narrative. I think it needs both changing the norms and changing the system. While changing the system is relatively easy, you just not just, but it is equally, equally hard, like affirmative action or steps towards recognizing women unpaid care work in a social protection, and to some extent, for example, eliminate gender pay gap in the company. Changing norms is more difficult. And what I can gather from observation done, from my work to be critically aware of this issue is the norms changing efforts are coming not from the policies or the system, but coming from champions. And I think this is where the social entrepreneurs play a greater part in, this changing norms narrative. I think we have, today surrounded by champions, but let's again go back that it is not easy. Our effort to change the norms have always been challenged by many groups. But what's important is we are not able to also embrace other powerhouses, the media, the system. If you're also probably aware of in the realm of impact investment or private equity, those are the current powerhouse of where this changing narrative could be. We could offer something. I think my last point is I think in order to change this narrative, we need to be visible. That's it. I mean, if we can show that the movement that is built by women can move, things, then that is the powerful way of saying that this is no longer invisible. We have power. We have to exercise our power. Don't say that we have invisible power. We have power, and we need to exercise that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dewey. From the social construct where women are kind of relegated to be in the private spheres, we are sort of made invisible. And some of the, I would say, measurement in that space, it's difficult to measure. So because of that difficulty in measure, it then, kind of have that vicious feedback loop. That because it's difficult to measure, then it means that women are not contributing much compared to in the public sphere. It's easy to go by numbers, right? Quantifiable data. And I really love your point about how can we make that invisible contribution visible, and we are doing that by recognizing some of these unpaid care work. Putting the quantifiable contributions there as well, but also changing the norms by women social entrepreneurs, by representation in the public sector, in the powerful platforms, in media, in academia, in policies, and representation in those power platforms are able to help to shift that norm and representation to make it more visible as well. And the power has always been there. It's just that how do we make the invisible visible, right? And in going to Dr. Iman, do we mention about women social entrepreneurs being the champions and being, the visible flag bearers, of women empowerment and women being able to change society and change communities and economies? In what ways do we see women leaders, redefining success in your, experience in this space? And how do you have some, examples of, women social entrepreneurs contributing to this? Dr. Iman, you're on mute.
Yeah, well, one of the things we have to learn to unmute ourselves, but
in all sense of the word, right?
Actually, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's very good. DB said hard questions. I will offer hard answers. So this is crazy, revolutionary, tough answers. Okay, so and usually I do that, so you'll get used to me. But to break the invisible wall, and to be visible, we have, yes, to change the narrative. We have to change the rules of the game. And by doing that, we know, I don't remember, but there is the difference between resistance and opposition. And both are important. Up till now, as a women movement, we were doing opposition, which we're trying to change the system from within, which I think we should continue. Mm-hmm. But resistance means, I'm a political scientist, so, resistance means you go out of the system and you resist. So we have to do both. I don't believe that we have to do one thing and not the other, but I think we should do both. And we should be encouraged to do this, because if we don't do it, nobody will do it for us. And these are things we have to understand. Mm-hmm. I will just, although WISE is all about your professional life and social entrepreneurs, I couldn't help myself but want to add some ideas on the personal, for example. So for example, reproductive health, I don't want to call it reproductive health anymore, ladies. We have to call it reproducing society. I say it in Arabic in our culture. I say we are reproducing the presidents, the ministers, the army for everybody. So pregnancy should not be taken as a private matter. It's a public matter, and in socialist countries, that's how it was used, right? We should not be punished for being pregnant and taking 3 months out or breastfeeding our kids. We should be rewarded, actually, financially and recognized, because without us, then we will not have soldiers in our armies, we will not have scientists, we will not have even presidents in our countries if they are men, So I think this is the first thing of changing the norm and the language. This is number one. We have also to be very brave about the confusion between religion and culture. And by the way, everywhere. Like, for example, there is a presentation in the world and in the Arab world, FGM, which is really mutilating our organs, is done by Muslims. Actually, it's done by Muslims and Christians in Egypt, because it's a cultural thing. So again, we have to be able to not be afraid of recognizing, the problems we have between culture and religion. And we also have to recognize that a lot of these women we're talking about have no alternative to the male provider and protector, So in many cases, we keep on saying women should talk. Yes, we can talk, and thank God we are all very strong, but the bottom of the pyramid, we have to find institutional alternative for them, So this is on the personal. I couldn't help myself, sorry, but I'm a feminist, so I couldn't help myself. But anyway, on the professional level, the only way is to change the rules of the game, and that's why we came in WISE with the 3 definitions CHERYL talked about. So originally, everybody was talking about your impact, and impact investment, Debbie, is how many people, and I always say this: if we don't solve the problems that are in our cultures and our countries across, by the way, including the West, we will not be able to be a productive and healthy society. So scaling up is changing laws. And you said, give you examples. Scaling up is changing laws, which most of the women entrepreneurs do because we're cause driven, because it's the laws that affect us or our children. In the Arab world, in Egypt, in 2003, my other NGO, the Women, the ADJU, Association for Development and Enhancement of Women, we spearheaded the change of the nationality law. Up till 2003, women could not give the nationality to their kids if they married non-Egyptians, but men could, right? When we changed, what was the problem really? Not the rights only. The problem was that the kids of these women in Egypt could not go to school, could not work. Girls had to marry early to take the nationality of their husbands because these women had to pay in dollars to put them in schools because they were not Egyptian. When we changed that law in 2015, I discovered that 17 million kids were able to take the nationality. And I then, and if we talk about, okay, how do we measure it so that the men and the ecosystem understand? So first of all, it's 17 million kids, but also it increased, they were able to work, to be educated, and it increased their contribution to the GDP, it increased the contribution to the taxes. So all what we need as women, social entrepreneurs, is not to wait for someone else to quantify our impact. Dini and Ashoka fellow in Indonesia and Nani, by changing some laws, they were able to affect 40 million children to have birth certificates, for example. Do you know what that means? It means that these people can go to school and again be economically productive. So I always say women social entrepreneurs, by our definition of scaling up, changing laws and regulations, we do economic sustainability, not immediate gratification of financial sustainability. We are reproducing society, but we're also impacting economically millions of people, and we are adding to the country. So all what is needed from us and from organizations like JASS and the UN Women is to quantify. And we don't wait for men or universities to do this for us. We should do it to ourselves.
Right.
Scaling, so this is the scaling up. The scaling out is the normal, many people, but we also have to clarify to people that if I talk to a million men and women about FGM or wife battering or the violence against women, I can talk to a million men and everybody will be happy. Oh, and then talk to a million people. But how many of them have really changed?
That's right.
So we have to explain to people that by selling 1 million hamburgers, it is clear that you got $1 million, right? Because $1 a hamburger. But if I change the mindsets of 10,000 people, that they stop the FGM or they stop the wife battering, and what Danny calls women lead change within the household and the community, what we do is that the next generation, so if we come back after 10 years, they will be 1 million people affected.
That's
so
right.
Again, it is up to UN Women, to JASS, to SAP, to everybody of these organizations to quantify, to go back and see every one of those social entrepreneurs, how many people were affected after 10 years. And actually changing behavior, mindsets, affecting people takes time. But I always tell the businessmen, especially the businessmen and the investors, if we are not able to reduce crime, if we invested in better education, if we invested in better, what women and social entrepreneurs were in better laws to protect people, then your markets will be stable. So, we have to speak like this. And I always tell this to the Arab world here. If we have listened to women social entrepreneurs and reduced battering or violence and improved education, we will not have terrorists. And if we don't have terrorists, then we will have stable markets. So your business will flourish. So we have to talk like this. We should not be, and we should talk again. And I really, really want to emphasize this. We have to stop talking about the challenges we face. We have to say how we overcome these challenges.
That's right.
Every one of you here on this session has overcome, even if it's a small challenge, because then we become role models for younger girls. So I mean, this is how I feel. I think the examples I said, but I also want to say last thing. We also sometimes say that sometimes women are unfair to other women. But that's also because the way we raise our women. I always say this in our programs. We have something called Girls' Dreams program in my other organization. We have rich or poor. We play with a doll, we play tennis, we are encouraged to play, I don't know, horseback riding, or whatever, according to your, but we never learn to play team plays, boys play football, or, and in the football, you learn something in political science called log rolling. Whatever the guy learns to pass the ball to this other guy, so he puts it in the goal.
Right.
He already learned that he will not reach his goal except by working with this other guy, whether he likes him or not. We are trained to play zero-sum games. Yeah, we are trained to play zero-sum games. If I play tennis with Vivi, I have to win and she has to lose. So in my mind as a kid, that's what I've been learning. So in all my programs, and I even encourage a lot of our fellows, we always encourage girls to play team games from when they're kids, because then they learn. But also, I have never met a woman who was bad to me, because I also believe in them and I give them excuses. So also we have to do that too. We empower others, but we also give excuses for older women than us. I mean, I'm very old, but even older, because they have been raised like this. So we understand it and we empower. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think these are hard answers that we have to really face and try to, fight for. Every one of you, I'll come and haunt you. You have to believe in that.
I think, Dr. Iman, you raised many, I think, hard answers, from your point on changing the system, both within and also without. And how are we able to shift the entire mindset that when we are expecting, we are not becoming a less productive person because we have to take 4 months, 5 months out from work, but actually we are producing the future, talents, right? Building a pipeline of talents, to your point, the future scientists, the future businessmen, the future presidents, and to your point on, the scaling up, scaling out, and scaling deep. All three scaling strategies, which are adopted by women leaders as well as women social entrepreneurs, they are able to give us the amplifier and multiplier effect. And tracking that longitudinal impact is tricky. It's easy to your example of selling hamburgers, right? You sell hamburgers in a month and you can measure what the profits of that hamburgers sold. But in many of the essential work in scaling D, they are longitudinal impact. They have to be tracked over time and tracked over generations. And when it's tricky to track, sometimes we don't do such a good job on that. And those impacts are then unrecognized. And hence, the effort and the work are not duly acknowledged. And your last point on playing team games, I think many a times, sometimes, sisterhood, we, double-edged sword, sometimes it becomes a zero-sum game. Sometimes we support and back each other. So I think we need to really be much more team-based. As Najwa mentioned in her opening remarks, if we have power, if we have freedom, we have to give that to another person and another sister, right? Coming to you, KUNTHEA, Dr. Iman and Dwi mentioned about these macro changes to the narratives that we need to see. And in many a times in our conversation in the space, we talk about preaching to the converted, right? Everyone in this room, we are all advocates, we are all supporters, change makers. How can we get more support from others currently outside the movement, the unconverted, and get them more involved in both the conversation as well as the action?
Thank you. Before I answer to that, I just want to also touch on, we may don't want to talk about the challenge, but the belief that the women have is really a challenge that we need to really recognize, and how we rethinking about that. Because based on our experience working with women, especially the women from the grassroots, the garment worker, who is in Cambodia, they are the garment industry is the second income for Cambodia, and 7,000 workers are women. But a lot of things that was normalized, the violation, sexism, exploitation, and abuse, the right and the gender-based violence that those garment workers are facing is a big issue. And they are the one that create a lot of job, a lot of income for the country. But at the same time, the whole salary of the all garment worker in Cambodia cannot equal the CEO of Gap, for example, or the brand like H&M. So how those equality and mean, and when the woman think that is my karma, that is my fate. For example, like if they facing the gender-based violence, they asking the technical man to help them to fix their machine, and they forcing them to be their second wife or ask her to sleep with him. So I mean, those issues you not really can see it. So many things, and how the women are really challenged within those systems that really not able to see, and a lot of collusion between the factory owner, the brand owner, and also the government. And you can see outside like how those brands are promote, how they respect the garment worker, you know, how they respect that. But a lot of brand, a lot of factory that we are working with is not, it's totally not. A lot of dirty work is there, and women are the one that affected by that. And so those is need to really unpack. And I think that I just to bring, and also the narrative of the capitalism that give us, you know, combined with the individualism, like how those is normalized, the money oriented, the commit to everything that there. So I think that is something that we need to also rethink about, you know, the way that we're living in this society. So those is just experience that I would like to bring from the work that we did. To respond to the question, I think to really engage, because every one of us are living in this system. We are internalized with the patriarchy system. Even us as the woman, even we are the woman, not mean that you will be a feminist or you will not dominate other. We're talking about the power sharing. So how are we understood that? How are we engaged and discuss to be able to have a deep analysis? Because sometimes people just do whatever society telling them to do, and they not really think how that impact to their life or to other life. So how we build, how we engage, how we really create a critical space that everyone can really discuss and question, you know, a lot of deep question that can support and bring other people to be with us, and to recognize, not to confront, to engage. Because when we confront, it would be confronted back to us, and it would be, you know, not the solution. So how we engage, how we understand the root cause, and how we engage with those people that outside of the movement, how we answer the question. For example, they talking about feminism is lesbian group when the work that we do in Myanmar. So how we engage with those those questions, to those that not really get the full meaning of that. So I think that is important, and make women visible, the story of change that women have a lot, you know, a lot of things, and make it so simple, the life that we are living in this society. Because sometimes when we use a lot of big word, technical word, we might be lose the real meaning of the life where we are living. So I think that is important, and it's the life that we are changing. This system is the journey that we need to really learn and unlearn, and also to build, you know, our alliance, the people, especially from the outside. So I think that some of the point that and how we engage with other, and now we can also use the social media, even like the social media, it could be two face of knife for us, but we can also use that opportunity to advocate for the thing that we would like to get the change.
KUNTHEA, I think you illustrated the important point about the power imbalance, right? In many of the systems that we are in, patriarchal system, social construct, but I think one of uphill battle is the power imbalance. And how can we engage and not confront that power imbalance? You mentioned the factory managers, the business leaders, the government leaders. They hold the power in their hands. And if we don't adjust that power balance by engaging and by changing the system from within and without, as long as the power balance continue to be there, it continues to be an uphill conversation and change dynamic. But we'll have to adjust that power balance and have a non-confrontational approach to making those engagement and adjustments, right? And like I said, it's really an alliance building effort to broaden the alliance.
Can I?
Yes, KUNTHEA.
Yeah, I think based on our experience, it's important for really have a critical space that women know they can unpack their belief, their obstacle, and know where is their power, so that they can organize their power collectively. Within that organize the power, they need to also do the risk assessment. How to do the risk assessment? You need to map the power player who are behind that, because if you're talking about the garment industry, a lot of $1 million there, people need to corrupt. So if they not give the compensation money to garment worker like 5,000 in one factory, they can get $1 million from that. So that's a lot of money from that. So how women know where is their power?
Right.
How they know who is the player behind that trend? Who is the collude between the government and the factory and even the brand? How they collect the information? Because when you have the information, when you have the number of the worker, then you have the power. Right. Because they know they not able to confront with you, but we using those source of power to really confront with them, peacefully. But they scare because they know that we have the power and we have the number, because the number of the worker is very important. You cannot go 1 or 100 worker, you need to go 1,000 worker, and you have the information, where is it, and those is important. So yeah,
that's right. Understanding the power system and where the sources and leverage of power are, right? And going to those acupuncture points with information so that you are able to engage and negotiate with understanding of those power spots. Dr. IMAN, I see that you have a hand raised.
Well, yes. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think it's very interesting what KUNTHEA said, and I agree totally. And I think that there is a need to balance. And I agree. I think that the balance is how we are not confrontation in certain issues, but how we are confrontation in others. I think I have been in this business for 40 years, and I started when I was 5 years old. But anyway, but I think it's very important to see that we have been saying the same stuff. And again, some of you said we shouldn't be talking to the converted alone. So I think we have to balance by not being confrontation in certain issues. When we were changing nationality law, actually we were not confrontation at all. We used language that makes the community support us. However, in other issues, like we're talking now about social entrepreneurship and changing the rules of the game or reproductive health, we have to be a little bit confrontational, or else we will not go anywhere, So this is important. But I also sometimes, there were some comments in the chat about we have to change women's minds. And when I was much younger, I was like, it's always the grandmother and the mother who forced the girl to do FGM, in the Arab world, like mutilation of the genital organs. And then I asked them. And the reason why these women were doing that was because there is a belief that if the husband on the day of the marriage, consummation of the marriage, girls are virgins in Egypt and they have to get married you know, and everybody knows their virgins on the day of their marriage. If the husband discovers that she's not, you know, circumcised, he scandalizes her. So a lot of the women were doing this to the girls, not because they are bad or because they want to humiliate the woman. It's because the culture, the system itself was forcing her. If she does not do this, the girl will be humiliated by her husband on the marriage night, on the consummation of the marriage. So I just want us to understand that, you know, yes, we have to change the women's mind sometimes, but also there is a construct in the society that is forcing these women to do that. And our way of doing it was to really go back and say, this is not in religion. And we mentioned that the Christians do it in Egypt, but also we mentioned that in Saudi Arabia, where religion is like the major thing, there is no circumcision. So it's not religious, you know? So we went out of the system. And instead of getting all these monks or the sheikhs to come and speak to them and say this is not religion, we got hard data in the villages we're working in, and we said it is not in Saudi Arabia. It is an African custom. The Christians do it too. So we didn't succeed 100%, still terrible, but at least in the villages we're working in, we succeeded. So what I'm trying to say here is balance is important, and I agree totally with you. And there are certain things we cannot be confrontational, but there are certain things we cannot sit silent anymore. We've been saying the same stuff for 40 years. So, you know, and there are things we have to come up and empower young girls to speak about it, and maybe young boys too, you know, hopefully boys will join us. But to finish my conversation, if somebody is already powerful, why should they give you part of his power if you don't take it? You know, like men in Egypt, for example, now are we're fighting the polygamy stuff. And why should they give it up? Even though the Quran says clearly that you have to be just and many other things. Because he wants to have this, even if they are not married to two wives, they still fight for it. So I think the balance is important. Work from within, I totally agree, and we should, which is the opposition, but also work from without.
That's
and
right.
The younger girls now are stronger than us. Let's empower them.
That's right. You know, we have to have both the confrontational and non-confrontational tools. And how can we have that kind of hard data or changing the systems from without, right? And having that voice across alliance to really raise some of these hard questions and answers. And I really want to take a time check. We're actually 3 minutes for Q&A. And I know that we may have some questions on the Zoom chat, Q&A chat. But now that actually we are in a group Zoom call, I really wanted to invite if anyone has a question for Dr. Iman, for Dwi, for KUNTHEA, you know, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, since this is a wonderful opportunity to hear and see you as well. Anyone with a question to our panelists? If there no question from the panelists, I would really like to close this panel, thinking that we have 3 minutes left, with, you know, one question to all the panelists, right? You know, we have discussed so much today, you know, making the invisible power visible, and maybe stop saying invisible power, because we do have power. Secondly, having a voice and you know, unmuting ourselves, you know, literally, and speaking up for some of this cultural and social construct issues, and also, you know, having the courage to be confrontational and non-confrontational, to raise and stand for some of these issues, so that we can have longitudinal impact as we scale deep in redefining the narratives of women leadership, and of course what defines a successful woman. If you were to choose one critical area for scaling deep, each one of you, Dr. Iman, Dwi, and KUNTHEA, you know, what would that be? You know, what would be your top priority in scaling deep, and what's the next action step for that? So maybe starting with KUNTHEA and then Dwi and then ending with Dr. Iman. KUNTHEA.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, I think when we discuss this, might be not able to really explicitly explain it, but I agree on the balance, because that is something that we need to really think about, and the way that it's not confront, because it's sometimes it brings people, especially the group that also part of the victim in this system, feel more victimized. So I think that is the point that we would, if we would like to build more alliance, and especially that the people are not in this moment. So I think that is the point, because even talking about the children and the parent, you know, they talking about they want to go out, they want to have freedom, but if they understand that their parent lost them, but because they are trapped in this society, so how they use the love heart to really deal with that, so that people can confront this peacefully by using love, you know. So I think that is what I mean. Related to that, when we're talking about the scaling deep, the critical area, I think for me is personal is political. How are we really create and organize our own narrative, organize ourselves to really create the space that we can open to be fully human being. I feel like we sometimes living in this society, we forgot the basics of the human being, where we need to be honest, accountable, transparency, love, especially. So go back to that, build a sense of the community where our personal is matter to the society, to the political, to our community, and how that connect to each other, and how we treat everyone equally, not because they are their age, not because their position, not because their class, not because their race. So how are we create those mindset, the change, and not you know, an opposition to the money oriented, to the materialism that the capitalists is try to convince us, and also the capitalists and the patriarchy try to convince us, when you are a strong woman, you are against the society. So I mean, those kind of sense of the community for me is important. The personal is very political. Thank you.
The personal, and how can we each maximize our own power and being human-centric, right?
Yeah.
Being a community of human beings rather than a community amidst all this social construct. Dwi.
If I were to choose a strategy for scaling deep, I would probably choose to put the word agency, women's agency, into women's empowerment. I mean, by we, I mean all the International Development Agency, they put a lot of word empowerment, but without agency. We put access to finance or microfinance for women, and we hence, you know, empower them economically. Wrong. We should, sorry, but we should put women are able to make decision to save money, to increase their capital, to own land, right? That is what empowerment means. So that is my strategy. I think that is, the priority. It is very, very important. We learn from the crisis that using empowerment wrongly could lead to disaster like this. Women have invisible power, and that power should be exercised. And exercising that power means to put women's agency into the heart of women's empowerment program.
Right.
Thank you.
I think you raised a critical point, Dwi. You know, in empowerment, it almost gives an impression that we are giving power by empowering, but actually all women already have that agency to make decisions, to steer their own agency and not wait to be empowered through an external source, right? And having the women that we work with in our programs, in our communities, in all of the 200 plus change makers, supporters, and partners joining us today, the women that we work with, how can we have them recognized and exercise their own agency rather than giving it up because of social construct or waiting to be empowered by an external source? Thank you so much, Dwi. Dr. Iman, closing with you.
Well, I will close with a story. This is how we are in the region. We say stories culturally. But ADU, the organization I started 100 years ago, we were the first microcredit. I don't like the word microfinance, but it's the microcredit organization, the first one in the Arab world. And we judged agency. I loved you. They called it agency, Devi. By a very funny story. So we would give the credit to the woman. First of all, we ensured that she's a female-headed household, which means the husband could be there but not working. So we ensured that whatever she's doing is not what the husband is doing, so that he's not taking the credit, and using her. But what was interesting, we created an index where we looked at what she bought. So we looked at her house before she got the money, and then afterwards when we were monitoring. And it's interesting. If she bought a washing machine, a stove, a fridge, she's making the decisions. If she bought a fan or a TV, he's making the decisions. Because women wanted to lessen the work on themselves. So instead of washing by hand every day, that was 100 years ago, so there was no, washing machine was a big thing. But men like to watch TV. They wanted a fan in the, in the villages and rural areas and squatter areas. But if she studied the stove, then instead of the other way of, it is called something else where they used to cook on, which was very dangerous and made women die because it created fires. So the stove or the fridge, because then she could cook for 2 days and doesn't have to wake up early, 6 o'clock in the morning. So the measurement of agency and decision-making has to also be that we understand each class. Somebody was talking about the classes and the different women and the workers. So because we were having fights with the Americans who were coming at that time telling us, oh, she's still in the house. No, agency is different where we are.
That's right.
She was able to make decisions by buying the stove or the fridge or the washing machine, or getting her kids in school or to the doctor, or, women invest in their homes, and in the luxury of the family, not the luxury of the man. So, I mean, this is just how we did it. And we were able to find that a lot of these women had agency. And we ensured it because their decisions was based on what they were comfortable with.
That's
and
right.
women, and women do have agency. In the Arab Spring, in the Egyptian uprisings, whether the 2011 or the 2013 against the Muslim Brothers, the majority were women. And in 2013, women went out, although they were all veiled and were religious women, against the Muslim Brothers, not because they were not religious, because they were afraid for their girls. Because the new system, the political system, was coming and saying women should stay home, right? The religious one. So women went out. So I think I agree with you. Women have agency. We just need to propagate it and to recognize it and to give them voice and to unmute ourselves, within and without.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Iman. I think really recognizing that agency looks different and manifests in different ways, depending on the context that we are in, the social class that we are in, and how can we amplify and recognize that in our various programs and intervention. I think that's very, very important. Thank you so much, Dr. Iman, Dwi, and KUNTHEA for your insights and for your perspectives, given your extensive work in the space.